First, I just want to thank you for your sincerity and for making us feel, honestly. It's what it's all about. Also, I just want to mention that it's hearing your amazing work. We've had really great writers in this series all year long. And hearing your work and the way that after our program you have joined their ranks and are writing with every bit as much originality and just talent with craft it just makes the work seem so worthwhile. So thank you for that. And I hope it's inspiring to students. So I just have I'm going to ask you 3 questions that are for both of you, and then we're going to open it up to everybody else. So my first question, this is something you've both kind of gestured toward already, but we like to ask writers who come to read with us and talk with us and meet our students to talk a little bit about the life of a book, like from where you first got an idea to how you managed to hold it in your hands and read from it. You know, because this is something our students are going to want to do, and as you know, it's hard to figure out. Yeah. So if you could just say a little bit about that for each of your books, it'd be great.
You want to go first?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
I'm a talker. So for me, I've always loved poetry. I wasn't always the biggest reader, but the program got me into reading there's so many different types of poetry books, just all kinds of reading within the syllabus of the courses that you'll take in the MFA program. So it opened my eyes to a different style of writing. And I can't say that it became easy, but it just opened the world of different things, right? So you just write, you revise. Of course, you revise. This is a big book, 120 pages. I could have had about 160, but it was about taking out things that I didn't want, finding the strength of your poems, you know, and it's a process. It's a process. It's not going to be an overnight thing. And just, I can't stress revising enough. I shorten some, I lengthen some, you know, you change the styles, but it definitely helps to read. Read.
We believe in reading here.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, just to go to the nitty gritty, I would say 2 things. One is I was deeply ambivalent about having my work in the world. I had a lot of fears about writing poems about adoption, about, you know, what's my story versus my child's. And so that was, you know, I had many poems about that. That's what I was experiencing, but I was deeply unsure about if the ethics of that, which I think are ongoing questions. So for me, it was also that I had a career as a civil rights lawyer, which I had continued. So there wasn't that much time. And also when I had the time, I would spend it being like, well, do I want to do this anyway? And that's not a good way to use the little time you have for your art. And so I really had to reach a moment of clarity around my why, which I think is a big question. And let me see if I can shorten this. I was on the board of this Women in Law conference. They had a free coach. They had a woman speaking there as a life coach. She said, sign up for free sessions. I got my 30-minute session. She's like, what's going on? It was the beginning of the pandemic. I said, poetry. She's like, okay, within 1 week, you need to send me a vision board with why publish. I know why I write, for many of the reasons that you talked about, to process, to put connections together, to deal with really complicated experiences. It's my way of personally processing that. And I know the value of sharing that with other community groups, like with a South Asian LGBTQ organization or with progressive, you know, spaces where I've performed arts for 20 years. So I know the power of writing for myself, and I know the power of sharing it with like-minded people. But why then does it need to be in a book, or why does it need to be in a library or at an airport? Like, why does it need to be in a place where other people can find it too? I wasn't sure about that because it seemed like stressful and a lot of work, and I actually didn't know if I wanted that. Not to mention, like, my parents will be mad, like that poem, right? Like, that's the cost of it. So what's on the other side of the cost? I wasn't sure. And so people might just want to do it because it's a cool thing to do, something to check off your bucket list. Like, people can just, like, for the ego, there's many reasons to do it. And I had so many reasons not to do it. I had to get super clear on my reasons to do it. So, basically that vision board is about connecting with others and, like, rising up together, social justice themed, and also mostly about helping people to know they're not alone. Mm-hmm. That's like what it was like what it boiled down to. And it took my college best friend saying, like, think about all the poets and writers who did that for you. And I was like, okay, you have a point. Maybe I'll work on this. And so when I had my little time to work on my art, I wasn't like, why am I doing this? I was like, look at the vision board, connecting with others. Okay, revise your poems. And then everything double down on everything you said, right? Because I had 30 years of poetry. So I was like, what happens then? Like, I have these like hundreds and hundreds of poems. Do I just pick the ones based on a theme or a chronology? Like, I had no idea how to do that. And I joined this group called Unicorn Authors Club during the pandemic. It was like an online community. And this is Minal's theory. My coach there, she's like, just pick the poems you love, right? That was her scientific method. So I just did that, which of course are the ones that are alive and resonate and just have something there. And then I narrowed that way, and then I grouped them based slightly on theme and time, right? So that's like some of the nitty gritty. But then I also just went to the back of Poets and Writers magazine and saw the submissions and saw the deadlines and just looked up those places and I said, just work the muscle. And which I thought would be a multi-year process. I mean, I sort of have a reality. I've been to enough AWPs. I thought this would be like many years in the making once I had like a manuscript. But then I got sort of lucky because I applied to a few of them and then I got one of those. Now that was great because it happened. You could say it took 30 years or you could say it took a couple months. Like, both stories are true. But maybe if I had to do it again, or maybe if I did this again, I would look at sort of what they told us at the program and what is, I think, common knowledge, which is look at the poets you love, see who publishes them, look when they have openings and go to that. Or now what I would say, having gone through so much work with publicity, is look at what publishers do. Now, that's a whole different discussion, but the short version is sometimes the big publishers will give you as an assigned publicist. But I've also heard friends say they had some of them and they were great. Others say they were assigned someone who didn't do anything. Others say they were assigned someone and then they themselves weren't allowed to do anything, which I think would be the worst, if they're not doing anything and you're not allowed to. So there's so many different angles to it and pros and cons. But I do think knowing what that publisher does or does not do around publicity is an important thing to keep in mind. And also, my friend's husband has many books, and you know what? For each book, he did one event that they put on and went on with his life. Again, what are your goals, right? And then I have another friend who said, I made this book and I want to do justice to it. I want to do right by it, and I want it to be out there everywhere. So I think I'm somewhere between those two people, right? Like, some days I'm like, why am I doing this? This is hard work. And then I have to be like, no one's making you. And just sort of like go into my own, like, do what feels good and comfortable and feels right.
It seems like somebody is doing a good job with promotion because you have more blurbs to your book than I think anybody.
That was a whole thing because I didn't know how blurbs work.
Maybe talk to students about that because they don't know either.
I didn't know how blurbs work. So I just asked like my 20 favorite poets, and then many of them said yes. And then I had a lot of blurbs. But you can also just do it in stages. There's also like different deadlines that the publishers give you that aren't real deadlines, but I thought they were real deadlines. Like, you need to have them by this date. So then I was like, well, I have to ask them all at the same time. I probably didn't need to do that. So it's a process. It's a process, but yeah.
Both your books, which I've been reading over the last few days, just fundamental to them is the idea that the personal is political, but more than that, both of your books get really concrete about the ways that our bodies are political. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about how and why you do that.
Since I've been talking about it. I did.
So, first things first, the obvious. Color, complexion, period. Dark, tattooed. It's funny, my wife and I had a conversation the other day. Back to the conversations. But my wife and I had a conversation the other day about, I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but it came to the point that if somebody looked at me in the street, tattoos, the size, beard, they would never expect me to have an MFA. Right? So I always wanted to create something to let people know that you can do it. You can be born in Brooklyn. You can live in Queens. You can go to the public schools. I went to public school from day one to the end. I went to college. I went away to school. Didn't do great. Came back home. Started working. Then I said I wanted more. Went back. Finished my associates. I want more. Go get the bachelor's. I love this writing thing. Let's go take it to another level. Let's learn the proper way and get some more knowledge, get open to a whole new set of things. So I think there's something about promoting that young Black boy can do it, right? So, and we start talking about the body. This whole work is about the body because the body betrays you. So it's my two biggest fears. One, your body betraying you, and one, just people looking at you and thinking something just based off that color of your skin and such. So the body is so essential to this art, this book of mine. It's everything. And I feel like so many people take their body for granted on different levels. You think about your size, you think about your health, but it's just to the eye. It's just the little things that mean so much. And I carry that. And I love the fact that I carried it and I'm so strong with it. And the N-word is a big, major thing in the world today. But I feel like there's a way to snag that power back and use it in ways that we identify with each other, with ourselves. So words, looks, size, body, everything. You can use it all. Everything in this world is at your disposal as a writer, as a poet, as an author. Whatever word you choose fits you best. And I think it's important to use it.
Yeah. I mean, you go even inside to the cells.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely agree with all that. And just thinking about the bodies that we name, in my day job, I recently wrote an article about the attacks on DEI and how in workplaces, actually, diversity and inclusion is more important than ever, and we shouldn't back down from it. And just because the Supreme Court decided something about admissions, that really doesn't mean anything legally, but our opponents are trying to weaponize it and make everyone think we can't do that anymore. And so in the context of that article, I named George Floyd and I named Next Benedict to just give examples from a few years ago and from now about why many of the programs that were created after George Floyd was murdered need to continue, and we need to double down on that versus destroy them. And these legal publisher people were like, in their first round of edits, they took out both names. And I was like, yeah, no. You know what I mean? Because we have to name that these things happen to actual human beings and there's systemic issues as well. And I was able to go and I went to Minneapolis last week and was able to go and pay respects to the site where George Floyd was murdered. And there's beautiful murals there and signs and graffiti. And it's definitely a place that is being marked and remembered. And the fact that people want to take that out of our memory is remarkable to me. And I think it was because of the kind of audience it was, right? In-house lawyers, or like maybe they won't, connect with that. But it's like all the more reason, to name it in that context. And so I'm giving that as a recent example about just like the bodies that are destroyed in our society and how that cannot be in vain, right? But there's poems there's multiple poems in addition to the title poem. There's also other poems about the fertility treatments and that the embryos and the things that we're not allowed to talk about, right? And especially now, when even people with wanted pregnancies are being at death's door because they can't get their health care that they need, and having to travel to other states if they have the funds to do that. Like that's the state of the nation, which is bananas and needs to be righted. So that is a piece of it as well, in addition to race and family and all the other pieces that have been discussed.
Yeah, I mean, just for the students here, the thing you mentioned about the article that you recently wrote and the editors, you'll have editors who give you great advice and are incredibly helpful. And you also have times when you have to fight your editors because they're going to want something else. And it's going to be a misunderstanding of what your commitment is, so you'll experience both. Yes. And you got to figure out how to navigate that. All right, I have one more question. So these books are both art and activism, and those things are inseparable. But I think it would be useful for people to hear about how really practicing your craft and revising, why that's important for the political messages to be heard.
Yeah, I'm happy to start that because that was what my essay was. Some of you may be prospective students. That's what I wrote my essay about when I was trying to get into MFA programs, right? And it was about how the work has to also be, emotional and poignant and moving, in addition to just being about, here's a story that can be told, right? And there needs to have some lyric and it has to be interesting when you read it. And most of the time when I revise my poems, often it's when I'm going to do a reading right beforehand. That's when you're always making those notes and those edits. And, this poem about the L2 bus, I wrote it probably a week ago, and this is probably only the third time I've read it. And every time, before I read it, like this time it was adding the algebra and the HelloFresh, right? Like steps away, like that detail, right? Is showing like someone is questioning if this thing can be real when it's happening steps away from his question. It's happening in real life, right? So adding those little details, I thought, and that came to me just as I was like walking somewhere, right? And so these poems are alive and as you mentioned, like every time when you look at them now, you're like, I could have said this other thing, right? They keep going. They keep going. And so it's definitely a process. And the editing is super important.
Sometimes when I'm reading in front of people, I will find something inadequate and revise it on the spot, and not read what's on the page.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a process.
Roger?
But also, I think it's also highly important to tell some stories. Not just your own stories, but others, especially coming from an African-American point of view. There's so much out there. So research is also a part of writing. So it's the research, it's revision, it's what do you want to say? Whose voice do you want it to be? Is it your voice? Is it someone else's voice? Are you speaking for the people? You know what I'm saying? And I think that's also dangerous sometimes because I don't want to speak for the people. I want to speak for me. This is me, Roger Wyze Smith. And then there's other poems that it's like, no, this is the Black community. So there's this so much into it and getting it correct, changing it. That's not the voice. Or sometimes in a poem, I'll go out of voice and have to come back in, another thing that I've mastered here. But it's just about just getting it out. And it's not only about making it relatable to people, but you need people to be related to it. There's something so important about not feeling alone in these words, in our own work. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, this is my truth. I can make a book about anything, but how is it going to make you feel? How is it going to make you feel? Can you relate? And you want somebody so bad to relate to it because it makes it more real.
Can I ask a question? Have you had any experiences now that the book has been out where you have felt that sort of connection with readers?
Yes,
Can we
and in places that I probably wouldn't have expected at first.
Can we hear about that?
So I had a reading this past September up in Hudson Valley, right? So I go into this place, my wife and I, and I see the room is full. It's a full room, which is awesome. I'm like, oh, up here in Hudson Valley, this is beautiful. I saw 2 out of 40 people that look like me. And I'm just like, do I edit the route that because I make myself prepared, but I'm like, do I edit where I go? And I'm like, no, I don't edit where I go because this is where God moved me in this night, right? So I want to, and when I tell you that the amount of people that came up after and, shook my hand and, I'm breaking up because, this is last year, September, daughter passed in March. So there's so much emotions and you never know who can relate. You never know anybody's story. Yeah. So you putting yours out can give them the power to get theirs out. Like this thing of ours that we do, this writing is so important. And some of the times you won't get the financial end that you want, but there's so much more to it. You know what I'm saying? Having people come up to me and talk about, oh, you touched me, this, I had this happen to me and that. And some people can't voice that. You know what I'm saying? Some of that pain is so visceral that they can't write it down. And before you know it, you're writing it for other people. And it's important. It's so fulfilling. So it's important work. It's important work. Turn your fears into art. Push it to the people.
That's right.
Thank you. Yes. All right. I'd like to take questions from the audience, but first I want to ask Carl, can people be heard on Zoom if they talk from here, or should I repeat the questions? Okay. And we may have some questions on Zoom as well. All right. So questions.
Question. Since you guys are both alumni of the program, I was wondering, since in the years since you've been in the program, what kind of pieces of advice have stuck with you from your time at Queens College?
So Maddie Holden's question is, here are 2 people who graduated from our program. What have they taken away from the program that has stuck with them? Yeah.
Go ahead.
So my first thing, I think I mentioned it 1,000 times tonight, revision, right? When you feel the piece is done, it might not be done. I would say, well, for me, I also come from a background of spoken word and going places and doing shows and stuff like that. But for me, I would say get it out in the world. Let yourself hear it. Let yourself see people's response to it. Practice it in the mirror. Read it. Close it. Get away from it. Take some time away from it. That's another thing that I definitely learned here. There's some practices that Nicole Cooley taught me, which is give yourself a little timer, right? And write. 2 minutes. Write. When that timer goes off, take that, trash it. Well, not trash it, but go in there, pick apart the pieces, write some more. And you will find you have maybe about 5 different sections, and there's probably gems in each of those sections. And you can combine them. You can really, the whole thing is revision. It's just how you want to revise. But I would definitely say that's the biggest takeaway from this program is revise. When you feel it's done, it's not. When you feel there's more, there might be more. Sometimes less is more. So, chopping it down, chopping it up, and look at it. Have other people read it, get some critiques on it. That's another thing. The title came out of, it's in a poem that's in the book, but when I wrote it, I was talking about radiation machines and machine gun funk. And in a session here, student was Alan. I don't know if you remember Alan. But he and I talked about it, and it just makes sense. Eliminate one of the machines, boop, compact it, and I'm like, damn, Oh, that's beautiful. You know what I'm saying? And I loved it. I loved it. Before that, the title, I don't know where the title was going, more towards the cancer portion, but just revise. And like I said, find somebody that you trust and bounce ideas off of them. Utilize who you have here. These people are trustworthy. Utilize and pick their minds on everything. And it's not just your major. It's not, what are they called?
Genre.
It's not just your genre. It's so, if you're a poet, find some things in other, it'll help your writing as well as it'll give you stuff to use within your poetry or within your, novels or whatever you're writing, playwright, all of that. Utilize everything that you can. You're paying for it, utilize it.
Nicole Cooley's watching this on Zoom, and I have a feeling she's very gratified to hear you stressing revision.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on what you said about the genres because I appreciated that this program required multiple genres. And I had the opportunity to teach creative nonfiction, which was a genre I did not know when it was assigned to me. And so that was awesome. So I spent the summer reading all the best essay collections and just reading about the genre and loved teaching that class because I was learning so much in preparation for it and then teaching it. So that was something that I really, really came to enjoy through the program. And I took a class on Caribbean women's literature. I don't know if they had that when you were here. It was incredible. And so just being able to read, as you said, and learn from so many different authors, their styles, and obviously from all the professors here too. Yeah.
Was it June Bob who taught that class?
That name is not ringing a bell, but maybe that's
She used to teach that class, but
wonderful.
No, it wouldn't.
This was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. All right, it's all right. We don't have to. We don't have to remember. More questions? Yeah, Joe.
So I know, we've talked about revision as something being really important, and I was wondering if you could both just speak a little bit on, like, when is it time, or how do you know when it's time to submit?
Okay, so Jill Crocetta is asking for them to elaborate on revision, but specifically when they know something is ready to submit.
I mean, I think as we've said, it's hard because even when it's in a book, you see little tweaks that you want to make. But I do think sometimes there are poems that feel, when you read them out loud or you share them with people or you share them in events like this, it feels like it has some sense of cohesion to it. So I think reading out loud has been a big part of my revision process. And that helps me to know when it's, let's call it done for now. Which I think is the closest that many of us feel like we can get.
So when you ask about submitting, what do you mean? Submit to where?
Just like I'm thinking like sending into like literary journals and things like that.
Okay, so my response to that is, it's gonna sound so crazy, is when you feel that your skin is thick enough.
Yeah.
Because you will get no's. That same no can be a yes to someone else. So you just have to keep sending it, really, in essence. And I got a lot of no's. There's some work that I know wasn't finished, but there was some work that I felt was crafted very well. But it really does depend on specifically what each place that you submit is looking for. And it doesn't mean that it's not good at all. Like, they get a lot of submissions. You know what I'm saying? So you can't take those no's to heart and feel, oh, my work is not good, it's not worthy. You really have to have thick skin and just bounce back, keep submitting it. But at the same time, like I said, give it to other people, let them read it, hear some of their thoughts and feedback. Readers, writers, and people that don't write, people that don't read, because they have their own style, they have their own eye, they have their own vision. But mix it up, and keep going.
We've got a question on Zoom.
A question for Roger from Roshri. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name right. But,
Roshri, yeah.
I have a question for Roger Smith. You mentioned spoken word, and from your readings tonight, there's a focus on sound, with not just the way you read, but also with the way the words are written. Is sound something that primarily influences your work? and how does it affect your process?
Carl, do I need to repeat that? Okay. All right.
So what is very crazy is when I came into the program, I knew my thesis. My thesis was going to be the difference between spoken word and written word. I knew it. That's where I was going. Nobody could tell me nothing. Kamika was not going to tell me nothing. Nicole was not going to tell me nothing. This is going to be my thesis. I don't know when that went out the window. Right? So because I have a history or background in spoken word and getting up on stage and stuff like that, how it sounds was always super important to me, right? And like I said before, you read, but you don't really read. I wasn't a reader as I am now. Now I consider myself a reader. So as much as I was concerned on how it looked on the page, it wasn't really a thing until the program. The program, when I tell you, I'm looking for a piece that I wrote in Cederat's class. Where is it? No, this is an erasure. So I have erasures in here. Where's the piece though? There's one piece that's just this is it. This is it. So we got pyramids in here.
Oh.
We have the word spelled backwards. We have different fonts, different sizes.
Wow.
This right here, this is a nifty little trick. Alcohol surrounds me. So I think that the program opens your eyes to making it more than just the performance. Unless you want to be a performance poet. Because that is a thing. Performance poetry is a thing. Me, I felt like I had that part already in the bag. I wanted it to translate on paper. I wanted it to be, when I was younger, I said I never wanted to be that kind of poet. You won't find my books in a library or a bookstore. I had a poem all about it and everything. But as I got older and became a reader, I felt like, when we go back to responsibility, I felt like I had a responsibility to show that a Black man from Brooklyn and Queens and from all this public school education, you can do that. You can cross over. You can be a written person. You can have books and your name on it, and it's a beautiful thing. So as much as I love spoken word, I do love written word. So there is a difference. Getting it to translate is something that you will definitely have to learn about, because there's such things as line breaks and jamming. There's so much that you'll learn more about in a program like this. Did I catch everything? Sweet.
Another question. Jennifer?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much. You're so inspirational. It's been a pleasure listening to your poetry. My question's about imposter syndrome. Have you always felt like you were poets, or did you come to own that identity via the program or after the program? Are you still owning it? I don't know.
Yeah, I can answer it in a few ways. One is, when I was in college, I did a Women of Color writing group, and our title of our little publication we put together was "I'm audacious enough to call myself a writer." So sort of embodied in that is like, it takes some nerve, and we have it, right? Just sort of like, we're going to say it into being. And then I took writing classes at many, many different places in New York City. I started with classes where sort of anyone can take them and you pay, or some of them are low cost. And then I started taking classes at the 92nd Street Y, where you had to submit manuscripts and get selected. And I took a couple with Cave Khanum, including with Kamiko Han and Tracy K. Smith, where, again, you had to submit poems and get selected. So I think my confidence slowly eased up. But there was a moment when I was in front of the 92nd Street Y where these people, my classmates, were talking, and they said, like, "Oh, I've been trying to get into a class here for a long time." And I was like, "Oh." Because it's like, I don't know any of these people. Like, it was just based on my work. And that gave me a little boost. And I think that was the boost that allowed me to apply for MFA programs, right? Because it's all so subjective, right? Like, nobody knows. Like, you're just writing your poems. And so I think with each of those moments, I gained a little more confidence than getting into a program or getting into a few programs coming here. And then I didn't do much in terms of sending stuff out for journals. I did a little bit, but then I also had like friends who were editing journals in terms of different issues, and they'd ask me for pieces. So I think through those sorts of experience, it was a very slow burning process to gain that comfort in saying like, yes, I'm a poet, right? But I did not wait for a book. Like I feel like for me, the book is wonderful, but I know so many poets, and for the reasons that y'all said, right? It's like there's so many wonderful poets, and you may or may not get selected for a book through a contest or through any other process, and that is about 100 different things, like who's the judge there, the subjectivity, what they're looking for. It doesn't necessarily reflect on the quality of the work. But I do think if you look for the right match, then that increases the chances that you might be selected and keep at it. I think that increases it. But imposter syndrome, I mean, it's just weird. It's weird to think about it as like this mark of success that the world gives it. And it's like, I think it's hard to grapple with like wanting to own that and say, yes, I did this thing, while also being very clear that there are many, many wonderful poets without a book, and that's fine too. And it's not some bridge that you cross to become a real poet. I firmly am against that notion, but I'm also celebrating that I happen to do this. Does that make sense? Yeah. Thanks.
Only thing I'll add to it is, I've always considered myself a poet. The program helped me to understand that I'm an author. I'm a writer, because it's not just poetry. And it's not just poetry that I try my hand at. It's not just poetry that I'm in love with. It's writing. So it's essays. It's one day from my mouth to God's ears, maybe a novel. People are pushing me to and I really want to try that because it's different, and I think that this program, especially what we were talking about, just trying other genres, you can try another genre and find out that I like this. I can write this. May take a little longer. Definitely takes a little longer. Thought Miles was gonna kill me a few days, but yeah, you can be more than just, you don't put yourself in that box. Don't ever put yourself in a box. So poet, yeah, I like that. It's a great title. I love it. I have shirts that say poet on. Oh, there you go, poet. But I think the moniker author or writer is something that we all can fit in.
I think we have time for one more question. Turtle.
You both touched on it briefly when it comes to getting your workout and revisions and processing. But as alumni, what was the process for you specifically after the program?
So Chris Latortu is asking that they both talked about getting their work out into the world, and but specifically after the program, how they navigated that. Does that sound right? Yeah.
You want to go? You want me to go?
Sure, I can go. After the program, I moved to Washington, D.C. about a year later, and there was a local organization there called Split This Rock. And so I was connected with them. And so I think having a community of writers was very key for me. And so they had ongoing workshops. And so I helped to lead some of them. I often took them. And for me, writing prompts are crucial for my process. And during the pandemic, I took many, many virtual classes just to have the time and space and structure to keep writing. And then I think Jason's going to send out this link that I gave with sort of the different groups that I've connected with and how they've all played a role in my process. But ultimately, it was that Unicorn Authors group that gave me support, coaching, encouragement, and structure to put time into it. And having a community saying, your voice needs to be out there, you can do it. So I think both the technical help on process and also the emotional help with all the barriers are both really crucial for, I think, work to continue for me. So I would say finding literary community was really, really important for continuing to write after the program.
Yeah, community is huge. Community is huge. Some of the bonds you make here, keep them. Keep them for as long as you can. I would say for life, but it's a two-way street. So I would say for as long as you can, nourish those bonds, and put yourself out there. There's so many places that you can submit. Put yourself out there. Get submittable. Send stuff to them over and over again. Check out. There's different things for a couple of pieces, for novels. Put yourself out there. But like I said, keep these connections. I'm still on John Rice's emails all the time. Kamiko and I, communicate every now and then. But Kamiko was very essential in send it here, send it there. And I'm just like, I don't want to send it anywhere. I'm done. So I'm like, I'm done. Let me do this. I want to do that. But nah, this is your baby. The stuff that you learn here, you will keep with you for the remaining of your writing lives, good or bad.
And I also want to name Rajiv Mohabir, who was my classmate and has been a wonderful friend and been so successful with many books. And we actually did an event together in Boston. And so he was my conversation partner. So just echoing what you're saying about keeping these important relationships.
Thank you so much, both Sunu and Roger, for your writing, for your wisdom, and just for your presence.
Thank you.
Big round of applause.
Thank you.